Welcome everyone to the beginning of our final unit. This is all about reflective writing, and this mini presentation will go over Unit 4, Day 1 lesson. Before we actually begin our final section of academic notes, I just want to remind everyone that your research paper is due. A hard copy must be turned in to me, and your electronic version of your essay uploaded into Unicheck by Friday during your class period. If you are absent, you must still get me a hard copy. And you must also upload your essay. Remember, on these 4 assignments, as well as your e-portfolio, which will be your major final for this class, I have to adhere by the SLIC guidelines on no late work. So just remember that for Friday. All right, today, as we begin our last unit, for a new section of academic notes, we're going to talk in class about the word metacognition and what that word means. And to illustrate it, in class we're using 4 different slides, and 4 different slides, 3 different concepts to think about the word metacognition. So if you're not with us in class, this first one, I'll be talking about an old movie from the 1990s, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and this quote that comes from the movie. If you are unfamiliar with the movie and don't know a lot about it, I've added some insights in the teacher notes on this slide itself, so make sure you read them. But after you look at the slide, read the quote, read the excerpt below, think about the movie, I'd like you to, in a sentence, define what you think this concept could have to do with metacognition. So add that to your academic notes. The next thing to use is more of a comparison in another setting to the word metacognition. I'm using a place that I visited, I'm sure a lot of you have as well, Glacier National Park. And using these 2 pictures to illustrate changes in the landscape of glaciers, how they evolve, how they change over course of time. Even through our lifetime, we might not notice a lot of things, but if we follow it over decades and decades and decades, we can see some changes that are taking place to these glaciers. I want you to think in terms of that as now you as an individual, and how maybe from day to day you don't see a lot of changes in yourself, but over a course of time, how do you see yourself evolving into somebody that might be a different version of you than one that was, say, 10 years ago? So think about that and add what you think that could be to your definition. The third one, now we're going to actually get into the definition itself of the word metacognition. Metacognition is a good illustration, is you can see off to the side, this little sketching is a person thinking about their thinking, which is in a nutshell what the word metacognition is. Thinking about why we behave a certain way, why we act a certain way, and oftentimes that thinking comes later on in life. It's not necessarily right at the time or even a week after events transpire in our life. So who we are, again, each day is kind of a culmination of many experiences in our past. The final example with metacognition that we're using here is to illustrate this famous painting by Norman Rockwell. I love it. It's many famous artists. If you studied art at all, you know that artists like to imitate or copy each other with one particular form of art, and it's called their self-portraits. And this is Rockwell drawing himself. You'll notice that in the painting, he has 3 versions of him. He has the painter, the one in real time, and then he has an observer, the one that's in the mirror, looking at things, and then he has this other sketch out there, this person who is out in the public, and that's on the sketchwork. And one of the things that I've noticed on this painting is that the one in the sketchwork, the public self, looks much younger. He wants to appear the reality of who he is and what stage of life he is when he actually did the self-portrait. It's probably not who his best self would be. He wants it to be that sketch version that he tries to keep out in the public self. Anyway, there's a lot of details in his self-portrait. I've added those as well in the teacher slides or notes at the bottom for you to look at. But this is a perfect analogy to help you understand what your reflective essay ultimately will be. Looking into a mirror, if you will, at yourself from about an experience and trying to paint it for the public self now and make it the best public self version of a real you as you can. The final thing to add to your academic notes is kind of what this word, and now to me, reflection is so close to the word metacognition. One of my favorite writers is Eudora Welty. She's a Southern writer in the early parts of the 1900s during the modern era. I love her short stories, beautiful, descriptive writer. Anyway, she talks a lot about how our human experience allows us to make sense of all the daily parts of our lives, to be able to sit back and honestly reflect why we are the way we are based on these different experiences. Helps us almost to put our stamp in this human experience that we are all a part of. Take time. She does such a better job of saying this concept in this quote, so take time to read that. So, in a nutshell, as we begin this new unit, reflection is a way that writers look back in order to look forward. I love that. Making sense of who we are now so that we can become a better version of why we are the way we are based on some situation that has happened to us in the past. Another way to say that in more of a laid-back term is I wish I knew what I know now when I was young. So to illustrate that, one of my favorite writing gurus, his name is William Zinsser. He's written a lot of books that I use as a writing teacher over the course of my career. And he said that famous artists do not become just famous by themselves because of beautiful work. They imitate other work. And we need to be, as writers, we need to do that more. We're going to get a lot of opportunities in this unit to look at famous writers and try imitating their work. And so today, we're going to look at several samples of beautiful writing that's been done. I'm giving these out in class. A couple of them are online. You can find them. A couple are my samples, and so you'll have to get those from me. I apologize since you don't have the booklet yet. Anyway, to do that, I want to talk about 3 techniques in your reflective essay that I want you to add. So these are going to be things that I have learned from other writers that make good storytelling, that make good, honest capturing moments of ourselves. And so I'm going to ask you to imitate some of the things that I have felt that make us better writers. So the first one is deals with organization. Normally when we write a story, we like to tell it in chronological order. However, rarely is that the best way to tell the story. Sometimes a completely unorthodox order works so much better. So in this essay, I'm going to have you read Donald Murray. He wrote an essay entitled "The Stranger in the Photo Is Me." And what he does is he finds this photo later on in life of him as a soldier. And so he looks back at it and starts thinking about who he was in that photo. So as you read that essay, notice not only is it a beautiful reflective essay, lots of strategies we could use in his writing that we would want to imitate in our own work, but that pay attention in this one specifically to the unorthodox way he organizes or tells a story in completely different time order. And the other thing that it's really cool about this essay is the fact that the story isn't, he has one moment where the picture takes place, but there's so many other events in his life that he brings into this one story, not just a 24-hour cycle of time that he's trying to rehash, what took place over the last 12 hours. So read that again and pay attention to unorthodox style so that you learn how to do that. The second one is a beautiful book that I came across 20, 30 years ago, and it's by a writer named Russell Baker. Now, he ended up being a journalist in life, but as he was trying to make sense of himself as a writer, he decided to write his autobiography, and he entitled it Growing Up. And in his essay, in his autobiography, every chapter is its own little story, if you will, but none of the stories are just one moment of time either. And sometimes one of the things that I love about his writing is too often students think that reflection is, I'm going to tell a story and then I'm going to give you a Sunday school lesson at the end. And so that's what up here I wrote as the title, Wrapping Up. You don't want to do that in a reflective essay. You don't want to tell a story and then wrap it up with a Sunday school lesson. What you want to do is reflect this insight of you later on throughout the essay. So the first chapter in his autobiography, he talks about his mom, and he jumps around a lot in it. I mean, he starts when his mother is 80 years old, and he goes to visit her in a rest home, and ends up as a child himself. So you can see that he starts it as an adult, ends up as a child. But anyway, so he also uses unorthodox chronological or non-chronological order in this chapter. But for this one, I want you to learn another technique. And this one is all about weaving reflection throughout your essay rather than at the end. So with 3 colors of crayons, I want you to, every time as you're reading, which the storytelling, color it in red. Every time he's describing, color it in blue. And every time he is reflecting, color it in yellow. And kind of the big purpose of this is by the time you finish reading this first chapter, you will see that a good reflective essay is a mix of those 3 things used simultaneously through the whole essay, not just chunks of each one in each chapter. So I want you to be weaving purpose and weaving the 3 elements of reflective essays, narration, description, and reflecting itself throughout your paper. Finally, is the last thing I want you to do is think about implied versus stated or spelled out meaning. Spelled out meanings are so boring for college students. You want them to get an implied version. So a spelled out version of Little Red Riding Hood, I wrote the moral of the story here. You don't want to do that for your reader. You want them to think about and come to a conclusion themselves. So this one is a student essay. A girl from Yale University wrote it, watching a friend die. And so you can read that and see at the end how what the implied purpose is rather than just stated at the end. Finally, you're going to do your homework, and I've run out of time, so it's right